So today I wanted to talk about one of my favorite Villainess mangas, and frankly, I feel like it's a bit underrated, even though the genre is very, very cut and paste. But today I'm going to be talking about I'm not out of Villainess. Just because I control darkness doesn't mean I'm a bad person. Which, if I'm being honest, I'm very happy I got out of the way. That is a very long title, and I did not want to say it again. Our protagonist has reincarnated as the villainess named Claudia Lezia, blessed by the Dark Spirit King named Geralt. In life, our protagonist was, as she puts it, an unwanted accident. She was hated and resented by her parents, so she sympathized with Claudia from the novel. After receiving his blessing, her skin and hair color changed to be a much darker complexion, an appearance that would stand out in a world where people blessed by the light spirits had a much lighter complexion and had much more colorful hair. Claudia was feared by everyone in her household, from her mom to her father to even the servants. She didn't have the greatest upbringing, so after her reincarnation, she began to distance herself from others, aside from her brother, who consistently would be concerned about her whenever something would happen. Even her father would put his obligation as the head of the household more important than his actual feelings for his daughter. And her mother was an especially tragic situation, as after her birth, after she was given the blessing, her mother became a shut-in and distanced herself as much as she could from Claudia. This didn't help much of her new life, but she did try and make the best of what she could from it. As things went on, it became more and more apparent that her efforts weren't in vain. She had begun to turn people that would have resented her, hated her, into people who genuinely cared for her, and this was honestly one of the better factors of this story. How she turned people who genuinely weren't going to care for her, they hated her originally. And I don't mean in terms of the story as we were reading it, I mean in terms of what was supposed to happen. She took people that were fated to hate her and gradually made them care for her, not in any despicable or underhanded way. She genuinely got them to love and care for her as a person rather than to see her as only a cursed child wielding power that could potentially destroy their country. Something that the story consistently brings up in the fact that her dark complexion is a bit off-putting to some, and they will constantly bring up the fact that the former user was someone who did curse their kingdom. For more context to her predecessor, he was basically someone the kingdom had placed a responsibility on, and he was later betrayed during a war or a conflict. And what had happened was that he resented the kingdom for doing this to him. So he had the Dark Spirit King, which we can assume was Geralt, given there wasn't really much context to the spirits changing lineages. We could assume that this person created a great disaster and did a lot of harm to the kingdom, which would not be a good impression for Claudia, given the fact that she not only has Geralt's blessing, she is also probably the only person in the world to have such an appearance. And in a world where that appearance is tied to someone who almost destroyed their country, I can't honestly say that it's not warranted to have some concern, given she has the equivalent of what that man does have, or did have, and can now do pretty much anything she wants. As she got older, she did prove her goodwill towards others, from saving a girl from a kidnapping to later saving a group of students from a monster attack. Claudia is trying her best to be the best person that she can be, despite all the prejudices and all the conflicts that may arise. And people have started to notice. People and characters that should hate her have actually grown to love her and care for her. And this is one of the better aspects that I thought was worth talking about, because it's not the fact that the dark spirit alone contributed to how she was treated. She herself made an effort to try and change everything. And this is a big part of how she grows and develops, because as she continues, we see not everyone is fine with this. Not everyone looks at her, despite how she's helping, despite all the things she's done. They still think of her as someone to be used, someone to be contributed to conflicts, and we later find out how they see her as a weapon. Before this, we should talk about our heroine, Amelia Logan, another reincarnation who also knows about the novel and is quite conceited and self-righteous. She believes that everything in the novel is hers, from the love interest to her role in defeating Claudia at the end as was written. But she herself proves time and time again to be arrogant, to be selfish. She doesn't care for anyone other than herself. And as she was blessed by the light spirit king, we later find out that this has not gone unnoticed. This is later on proven in a conflict she has with Claudia. During their time in the academy, a war breaks out between their kingdom and the neighboring country. Amelia and Claudia are brought up as tools to be used during the war, and once more, Claudia's father has demonstrated his obligation to his role as the head of the household over his caring as a father. And it cannot be stated that he's not hesitant with his decision, but rather than actually making a choice, he chooses to leave it up to Claudia, which can be seen as more of a cop-out, considering the fact that he will literally be sending his daughter to battlefields, even if she is under the protection of some greater deity. It's still his only daughter, and it can be said that this decision is a selfish one for him and for his house that would have otherwise sold her out in the original story to be married to the foreign kingdom. Later on, we find out that Amelia and her parents are called in with a meeting with the king, along with Claudia, who attends alone. During this, the prince arrives and protests Claudia joining the war effort, while Amelia's father is very proud and demands that she go. Claudia is faced with a very big dilemma as to choose between her life and joining this war effort, while Amelia selfishly is attempting to push Claudia to not only join the war, but to what she believes will lead to her downfall, as during the original novel, it stated that during the war, Claudia will then turn against the kingdom, forcing her to fight Amelia, and later on Amelia will defeat Claudia, earning her title as the hero who saved the kingdom. As the story progresses, we come to learn of a shadow figure manipulating things behind the scenes, as Amelia is seen being provoked by this character after the war effort, after Claudia should have gone on a rampage betraying the kingdom. Amelia is angered by this, since she doesn't have her chance to become the hero. This figure provokes Amelia into attacking Claudia. That leads to nothing. Unfortunately, after this conflict, or during this conflict, the Spirit King of Light appears and states that she knows that Amelia has changed. She knew that since her birth, it's not the same person, and that's why she has refused to help Amelia in her fight with Claudia. Thus, we can see that due to her own efforts, Amelia and Claudia have gone on two completely separate paths. The roles have reversed, and this wasn't some great change of fate that suddenly happened. This was a simple fact that two characters basically switched their roles due to how they decided to live their lives. One chose to be selfish, and one chose to be kind, and we clearly see how the story deviates from its original context as we progress. This obviously angers Amelia, which then leads to her attacking Claudia herself. Obviously, this leads to nothing as Gerald protects her, and we later find out who led this, and we know that this person is someone that had interest in starting the war to begin with. He had an interest in continuing it, but unfortunately, that didn't happen. Claudia not only had ended the war, she had also prevented any further hostilities through her methods of ending it, which I will not mention because it is frankly quite interesting to read. And quite boring, I might add, to actually see, but we'll get to that. Honestly, for my first review, this was the only thing that came to mind. Claudia, her character arc, and everything throughout the story, I loved it. It was great, and whenever I thought of my first review, this was it. This was the one that always came to mind. I love it, and frankly, I hope anyone who reads it will also love it, because it's genuinely worth reading, and I love the development of our characters and the contrast between what they were supposed to do and what they are doing, and how our main protagonist basically changed her fate just by being herself. She didn't do anything outlandish. She didn't save the whole world preemptively. She didn't destroy a nation. She did her best through her own effort, and it's clearly shown throughout the story, and it's shown throughout the people who changed. They changed because of her. They changed because how she was being treated, how she treated them. She changed everything. She did so much, and I was honestly amazed by how this story of tragedy that was supposed to be horrible turned into something much, much more amazing, and it quite frankly is a bit heartwarming, but there are times in it where your heart would just drop, because the underlying theme here is that our protagonist, someone given such great power, someone given a second chance, our protagonist was dropped into a place of hatred and a place where she would be feared, and she made the most of it. And there were conflicts and they were resolutions, and it turns out even though they had questioned her origins or had questioned what kind of person she was, reverted to fearing her again. And this did break our protagonist's heart on more than one occasion. We can see that they genuinely do continue to change, and she genuinely strives to make changes both for herself and for those around her, and we can see that she has no genuine prejudice, or no, that's not the right word. We can see that she has no genuine hatred or distaste for any of them. She genuinely cared for almost everyone in her family and her friends, even our own heroine that was supposed to save the world, who became selfish. She genuinely thought that, even at the end of the story, she hoped that there could have been a life for her. She hoped that she could have lived out a good life, and this is one of the stories that I had to review. This is a great intro to the Villainess genre. It's a very short, 19 chapters. It has a nice epilogue chapter, and frankly, I recommend it. I try not to spoil too much during this review, but I really hope you guys read it, you like it. Please like the video, subscribe. I'll try to make more videos. This is my first. I'm kind of awkward with it. I hope you guys liked it. Alright, like and subscribe. Good night.